Hello, and welcome to the Defiant Lawyers YouTube channel and podcast. My name is attorney Chloe Corbett, also known as the Duchess of Justice, and with me I have.
Attorney Augustus Corbett, aka the Minister of Justice.
We are your Defiant Lawyers. We will be providing you detailed analysis of all of the trending politics, policies, the personalities, and the pop culture that is dealing with our community and the Black community today. Today, we have some breaking news. We will be talking about the recently unsealed Trump indictment, as well as the historic United States Supreme Court decision about the Alabama redistricting. Excuse me. Stay tuned right after this. Hey y'all, what's up? Welcome back. I am getting back into the swing of things. If you all watched that video last week, you know that I was out for a few weeks. But Dad, I'm so glad to be here. How are you doing today?
I am doing fabulous, Chloe. It's always a great day when you and I can sit down and chop it up about the law related to, issues affecting the African American community. It is always a good day. That's a blessing. That is a dream come true, actually.
It really is. And we get to do this in our everyday life as well with our practice, Corbett and Corbett. So, what you all see here is the same type of conversations we have with our practice and with our family in general. We have always been the family to sit around the kitchen table and to talk about justice issues, talk about politics, have these spirited conversations and debates. So, this is nothing new to us. So, I'm glad to be able to do it on YouTube and on our podcast, Dad. But like I said at the beginning of this broadcast, we got some breaking news, y'all. Big things are happening in the legal and political arena. And the top two things that came out this week is one, that former President Donald J. Trump has been indicted on federal charges related to taking classified documents and putting them in Mar-a-Lago and other places where he did not have authorization to do so, as
Allegedly.
well as yes, allegedly. Sorry, yes, allegedly. It is all alleged. Um, as well as the United States decision about Alabama and the redistricting that they tried to do and disenfranchising Black voters. So, how do you feel about talking about these topics today, Dad?
They are blockbusters. They are
Yeah.
huge, huge topics, unprecedented with respect to former President Donald Trump. I don't even, I mean, the country has gone through a lot over its founding or since its founding, right? Civil War, two world wars, many other wars, the Nixon debacle, 9/11. I mean, we could go on and on and on. So we'll get through this, but these are uncharted waters with respect to former President Donald Trump. No question about it. And the voting rights case, that has huge significance for the African American community in particular. And I think the way you want to take it, Chloe, is I think you indicated you want to deal with the Trump indictment, and we'll do that first since it's just a really, really serious story. And then afterwards, I'll talk about the voting rights case.
Yes, let's do that. Do we have a slide to pull up for the Trump indictment?
Yes. And it starts with who is Jack Smith, the special counsel, actually.
So this is the head honcho. This is the prosecutor who has led the investigation into these charges since March of 2022. As you all can see on the screen, he is known to be an aggressive prosecutor who's not afraid of big cases. So he is used to these big cases. Now, obviously, he's never led an investigation against a former president. So this is something that is different. But you can just see his demeanor. I watched his press conference that he gave yesterday. He was very to the point. very short, professional. He did not get into the political arena about the political effects that this could have regarding Donald Trump and his co-defendant. So I think that the way that he conducted himself showed that despite all of the political craziness that is happening with this indictment against Trump, he was there to do his job. And Trump has attacked him on social media. He said various things about Jack Smith, but the way he handled himself, even though he's a prosecutor and we go up against prosecutors every day, I think that he conducted himself well in that political arena.
I think we have that video if you want to play it now.
Yes, let's go ahead and play it now.
Good afternoon. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with felony violations of our national security laws, as well as participating in a conspiracy to obstruct justice. This indictment was voted by a grand jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida, and I invite everyone to read it in full to understand the scope and the gravity of the crimes charged. The men and women of the United States intelligence community and our armed forces dedicate their lives to protecting our nation and its people. Our laws that protect national defense information are critical to the safety and security of the United States, and they must be enforced. Violations of those laws put our country at risk. Adherence to the rule of law is a bedrock principle of the Department of Justice, and our nation's commitment to the rule of law sets an example for the world. We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone. Applying those laws, collecting facts, that's what determines the outcome of an investigation. Nothing more and nothing less. The prosecutors in my office are among the most talented and experienced in the Department of Justice. They have investigated this case hewing to the highest ethical standards, and they will continue to do so as this case proceeds. It's very important for me to note that the defendants in this case must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. To that end, my office will seek a speedy trial in this matter, consistent with the public interest and the rights of the accused. We very much look forward to presenting our case to a jury of citizens in the Southern District of Florida. In conclusion, I would like to thank the dedicated public servants of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, with whom my office is conducting this investigation and who work tirelessly every day upholding the rule of law in our country. I'm deeply proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with them. Thank you very much.
Why Florida, sir? Why did you decide to bring the case?
There you have it. Just a matter of fact. Chloe, does anything stick out from what he said?
Yes, two big things. One, this was a grand jury out of the state of Florida. Most people would think if this has to do with classified documents from the White House and when Trump was president, why was it not done in DC or a state near DC? That is a question that actually at the end of that press conference, one of the journalists asked, and special counsel Jack Smith did not answer that question. But the government has decided to bring these criminal charges and to convene a grand jury in the state of Florida, which is interesting because Trump has had pretty close ties with the state of Florida. Mar-a-Lago is there, which is his social club and where he typically lives. Ron DeSantis is a Republican governor of Florida who is also a rival for Trump for the presidency 2024. And, Florida seems to be Trump ground. So it'll be interesting to see this criminal prosecution play out there. But another thing that stands out, Dad, is that Trump and his co-defendant are presumed innocent. That is important. And, even though this is a 40 plus page document and indictment against Trump and his co-defendant, these are just allegations from the federal government. they have not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, as Jack Smith said. So until and unless the federal government um, proves each of these 37 counts and 7 charges against Trump and his co-defendant, or unless Trump pleads guilty, Trump is presumed innocent. And that applies to any person in this country who is charged with a federal or state crime. So that's very important to remember. We'll have all of the chatter from the news organizations basically using this indictment as fact. And while there may be strong evidence in a court of law, he has not been found guilty. And that is very important to remember as you all continue to watch, the outcome from these federal charges. Are there anything else that stood out to you about that press conference, Dad?
Well, a couple of things, and I want to ditto all that you just said about the indictment. We have a copy of it. We've read it thoroughly. But as you said, right now it's just a document, just pieces of paper, and I like to illustrate that by saying, although you must take the indictment seriously, right now it's just pieces of paper that the prosecutor has to prove. And he said that, he acknowledged that. That's just the way our legal system, our jurisprudence work here in America, thank God. Couple of the things stood out for me. He said that this really stood out. He said there's one set of laws and they apply to everybody. I think that goes to the 75 million people who voted for Trump, who are out there. Many of them are out there on in the media saying, in fact, I saw, I think, the gubernatorial nominee for, I think maybe Arizona, her name is Carrie Lake. I saw her, she lost, by the way, and she did exactly what Trump did. She said that the election was stolen from her. But anyway, she made a video where she said to Merrick Garland and to Jack Smith and to, the Justice Department that if you expect to get to Donald Trump, you got to come through 75 million voters. And I want you to know that all of us are card-carrying members of the NRA. So that's where we're headed with this case, with these cases. And I think Jack Smith was trying to say, okay, but we have one set of laws. They apply to everybody. White, black, rich, poor, powerful, and the weak. Now, that's what he said, Chloe, but we know that's not true.
Yeah, we do.
We know. I mean, that sounded good in principle, but it's not true. There are two justice systems, one for people like Donald Trump and another one for everybody else. And that is the very reason why Trump has gotten away with so many things over his life, right? Because there are two systems, one for rich white men and another one for everybody else. So Jack Smith, yeah, that was a good statement. I understand why you said it. It's just not the truth. The last thing that I observed, Chloe, was when he said that his office consists of some of the most skilled, talented prosecutors in the country or the world or whatever he said. I think he was saying that to say, hey, you all, we're ready for a fight. Trump, your legal team, bring it. I mean, I got some talent on my side, so we're ready for this. Come on, let's do this. So those are the things that I observed.
And the fight is going to be, that Trump is not going to go down without a fight, without swinging. And something that you said in terms of the true justice systems, we see it every day with our clients, with the clients that we represent, and the fight that we have to do to get justice for our clients. But just the way that the government handled this investigation, that I read reports where the government tried to give Trump as much leeway as possible. Okay, turn over the documents. We know that sometimes politicians would take classified documents, but if you're willing to work with us, we can get this resolved. And it was until Trump forced their hand by allegedly, lying and obstructing justice, that's when they finally decided, okay, Let's continue, with this investigation. Let's use our grand jury power to subpoena and investigate this. So he kind of forced their hands. We know that if he was poor or if he was black, the government may not and likely would not have given the amount of leniency that they gave Trump to comply.
They would have swooped down on him.
Swooped. Yes. We're not giving you no leniency. We're not doing all of this. We're gonna bring a grand jury. We're going to indict you and move on with the case. So just the way that the investigation was handled shows that there really are two justice systems. So, Dad, I want to move into. Well, let's finish who Jack Smith is because that is
Okay.
important.
All right.
So, Counsel Smith, he brings a tremendous amount of judgment, experience, and energy to the job. He was chief prosecutor in the International Criminal Court, OCC or ICC, in The Hague in Netherlands. And he was also an assistant U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of New York and as first assistant U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Tennessee. We're going through this because we know that Trump supporters are going to bring, well, this is a political witch hunt. This is a Democratic president, his DOJ, going after a political rival through Merrick Garland's Department of Justice. And, what Merrick Garland and Biden are going to say, well, no, we have a special counsel who is in place, Jack Smith, who led this investigation. Merrick Garland had nothing to do with bringing the charges with the investigation. This is all a special independent counsel. And so we'll see how that plays out with the political back and forth between Trump and the special counsel and how all of that will affect his criminal investigation. But it's important for you all to know who the special counsel is in this case because he's been leading the investigation for the past year. Do we have the next slide, Dad?
Yes, and that would be of the charges or the counts that Trump faces.
So Trump is facing a lot, you all. He is facing 7 charges and 38 counts. And we will explain what that means. So before we get into the actual charges and counts, I want to start with the introduction, a part of the introduction from the indictment. Again, this is 40 something plus pages, so there was a lot to go through. But the government says that, as we all know, Trump was the 45th president of the United States. He took office in January 20th, 2017 when he was sworn in, and he remained in office until January 20th, 2021 when President Biden was sworn in. They allege that, and we know that Trump had lawful access to the most sensitive classified documents and national defense information that is gathered by the United States government, by the CIA, by the Department of Defense, and all of these departments that help us with intelligence, counterintelligence, military strategy, etc. And so their basic allegation is that when Trump left office January 20th, 2021, he took all of this classified documents, this intelligence that he had access to as president, and he took that information with him to Mar-a-Lago, to various places in Mar-a-Lago. And when they tried to get the documents and the information back, they're alleging that he obstructed justice, that he lied to them, that he conspired with his co-defendant to not bring the documents back. So that is a very cursory overview of the type of charges that Trump is facing and the different counts. So if we want to put the graphic back on the screen, Dad. So what are your thoughts just on the basic charges, Dad?
Very serious charges.
Yeah.
You know, these are very serious charges, and there are quite a few of them. So, you know, it's he has a handful here. He has an uphill battle, quite frankly.
He does. So the first charge is that willful retention. Let me put Can we pull it back up? The willful retention of national defense information. So basically, the government is saying that Trump kept these documents and did not return them back, and they were classified documents. And with that charge, the government has brought 31 counts because they have said that he kept 31 different classified documents from January 30th, 2021 until August 2022. So for a year and a half, he kept those documents in various places. And what I want to bring out, Dad, is the type of documents that the government is alleging in those 31 counts that Trump kept willfully retained. So the government said in its indictment that the classified documents that Trump stored in his boxes included information regarding defense and weapons capabilities of both the United States and foreign countries. That those documents contain information about the United States nuclear program, about potential vulnerabilities of the United States and its allies to military attack, and plans for possible retaliation in response to a foreign attack. These are the type of documents that the government is alleging that Trump willfully kept and had people who were not authorized to or had clearance to view these documents, he allowed to view them, and he also spoke about it. You know, Trump, while he was in office, and his supporters, they like to say that they support the military. Well, we know that he had back and forth with the intelligence community, but it's all about the military. The military, we love this country. Yet, based on the allegations from the federal government, he willingly put the lives of these intelligence officers and military members at risk, as well as the United States and all of its population. So this is serious. This is very, very, extremely serious. We cannot highlight how serious it is, right, Dad?
Absolutely. I'm a military veteran, and to hear that brings chills down my spine. But again, he is presumed innocent. These are allegations.
Yes, these are mere allegations. The government has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So that is charge one, that he willfully retained these documents. Charge two is that there was a conspiracy to obstruct justice. A conspiracy to obstruct justice. And with that charge, the government said that there was at least one count or one instance in which he conspired to obstruct the investigation, to not bring the documents back. That is basically what the government is saying. I want to pull up the indictment and get the language for you all so you all can hear it, because this is very important. So the government is saying that on or about May 11, 2022, in Palm Beach County in the Southern District of Florida, that Donald Trump and his co-defendant Waltine Nauta, who I believe was his valet, they knowingly conspired and agreed with each other and others known and unknown to the grand jury to engage in misleading conduct toward another person or persuade another person to withhold a document. So basically, the government is saying that Trump and his co-defendant, they agreed to mislead other people when engaging with the grand jury, and persuaded someone to withhold a document. Now, it came out that a couple of Trump's lawyers, I don't know if we can call them former lawyers, but they testified that Trump told them when they went to go gather the documents that Trump allegedly had at Mar-a-Lago, that Trump allegedly told them to take some of the more classified documents out and give the rest back to the federal government. So this is what this is saying in this charge.
Well, I tell you what, I hope that, well, I looked at that, and of course, as an attorney myself, I thought seriously about that. There have been several attorneys who have represented Trump that have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble, one of which is
Yeah.
Michael Cohen, and then Trump's old lawyer as well. And then, of course, Judy Giuliani and Sidney Powell have all been, I think Sidney Powell, a Texas attorney, I think her bar license was in jeopardy at one time. For me and for you, and I know I speak for both of us, we're not going to break the law for any client.
No.
Forget that.
Nope.
Forget that. Not going to happen. We're not going to break the law for any client. So a client who says, withhold this or don't do that or stop that or don't do this, cover this up. No. I mean, we're at the same time, we're going to protect our client's confidentiality, but we're not going to break a law. We're not going to break a law for any client, period.
Yeah. It's not worth it. We worked too hard. We swore to uphold the Constitution. We made an oath. And so we're not going to do it, and we're not going to commit any crimes ourselves to defend a client. Now, we aggressively defend clients, and we'll do so within all of the bounds of the law. But just like you named that, most of the lawyers that have been associated with Trump or represented Trump, they have not they have not had the most best of circumstances whatsoever, and that's being very kind. Um, so I want to go into the next charge.
Okay.
See if we can pull that up. So the next charge that the government is bringing against Trump is that he withheld a document or record. This is count 33. So the government is saying that from May 22nd to May 11, 2022 until August 2022, that Donald Trump and his co-defendant, that they engaged in misleading conduct and knowingly corrupted or persuaded another person with intent to cause or induce that person to withhold the document or record. And that specifically, allegedly, Trump attempted to persuade his attorney to hide and conceal the documents from the federal grand jury. So they're saying that Trump basically tried to persuade his lawyer to not bring the documents to the grand jury for them to investigate. And this is important because grand juries have a lot of power. They have the right or power to subpoena individuals. They have the right and the duty to investigate allegations before making a decision. So, the fact that the government is saying what Trump tried to tell his attorney to hide or conceal these documents is pretty big. They're also saying in part two that Trump allegedly tried to mislead his attorney by moving boxes that contained the documents so that his attorney would not find the documents and produce them to a federal grand jury. So the question becomes, well, how does the government find out about this? We know Trump isn't going to talk to him. And, maybe besides other witnesses, who would have told them? Well, so, we can imagine that it came from his former attorneys. And the question that could be raised is, well, everyone has heard about attorney-client privilege. And basically that is a privilege that is held by us as attorneys, that we keep our clients' confidentiality, that we cannot tell what a client tells us to anyone, the judge, prosecutors, family members, no one, unless the client gives us authorization to do so. Now, there are exceptions to that. And one exception is if the client is attempting to harm someone or wants the attorney to engage in criminal conduct. I also read that too, that there was a court order that ordered Trump's attorney to testify about what Trump allegedly did too. So there was a court order in this case as well.
Yeah, that's excuse me. That's real big. I mean, basically what the judge did in that situation was pierce that attorney-client confidentiality rule and said, hey, since there could very well be some criminal activity going on here, I'm going to pierce that rule and order you to say to tell what you know. Just like back with Michael Cohen, remember the FBI raided his office and home and took all his client information and so forth. So the attorney-client privilege rule is really strong, but it's not absolute. And when there's some criminal activity suspected, Prosecutors can go to a judge and say, "Judge, we think this lawyer is participating in some crimes. We'd like to get his information." So that's what happened.
That's what happened. And so all of the remaining charges that they have to do with the government alleging that Trump tried to conceal documents from the grand jury. So we see that they're alleging that he attempted to conceal a document in the federal investigation that has to do with the FBI's investigation as well as the federal grand jury's investigation. They're alleging that he schemed to conceal the documents, that he made false statements and representations. And there's two different counts for that too. That is the last count, so 37, 36, and no, excuse me, 37 and 38. So, I mean, wow. And I want to encourage everyone to read this indictment. This indictment is available publicly. It was unsealed. It is 40 plus pages, like we said, of the government detailing where they believe that Trump, um, committed offenses. But I do want to highlight a couple more things too. So this indictment just means that the grand jury believed that there was probable cause that Trump may have committed these charges and counts. Probable cause is a low standard in the law. It does not come anywhere near what the government has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt for a jury to find someone guilty of these offenses if Trump were to take his case to trial. So this is a very, very, very low standard, and this is the very beginning of the case. Now that there is an official indictment, Trump's lawyers are going to have access to the discovery on the case, meaning that they're going to be able to see what the FBI investigated, their files, their witnesses. They're going to have the right to do their own investigation, question those witnesses, etc. So there's a lot that's going to be done, even now that this indictment has taken place as well.
Yes. Well, let me just say a couple of things, and then we'll end it with just some closing comments about we're in this section and go to the next section. As criminal defense attorneys, let me put it this way. I have been a very fierce critic of Donald Trump. Fierce. I've lost friends over my criticism of Donald Trump, close friends. And, I just had misgivings about him from the very beginning, even before he ran for president. The way he treated Obama for those 5 or 6 years. And I knew about his racist behavior back when he was sued back in the 70s for for discriminating against blacks who wanted to rent apartments. So I've been very fierce critic of him, but I'm also a criminal defense lawyer, and that is, the side that I'm on. I'm on that side of the bar. We're on the defense bar, okay, and so I stand shoulder to shoulder with our brothers in the defense bar. So the lawyers who are defending Trump, we stand with them. Although, Trump is one of those kinds of clients, one of those kind of people who many people find reprehensible. Well, we've represented reprehensible people. People who have been accused of all sorts of reprehensible crimes. We've represented murderers, we've represented rapists, we've represented all kinds of people. That's what we do. That's the kind of system that we have. And I was talking to my wife about this yesterday, Chloe. When someone, is accused of committing a very heinous crime or set of crimes, if they needed medical treatment, we would take that person to the hospital, and the ER doctors and the other physicians and nurses and so forth would treat that person and not give one moment's thought whether he was guilty or not. Yet when we do our job as attorneys, it's as if we are somehow or another compromising ourselves. We're not. We're just upholding our Constitution, which we were sworn, we had to raise our hands and swear to defend the Constitution. And our Constitution has in it the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Seventh Amendment, other amendments that protect the accused, the actual people, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, the very people who founded the country, would not ratify the Constitution until it had these amendments in it because they feared a overly powerful, aggressive federal government because of their experience with the English monarch. So they said, we want to make sure individual rights are protected. It's really one of the beauties of our country, quite frankly. No matter who you are, no matter how heinous the country, society thinks you are, no matter how bad of a crime you committed, you still have certain rights. And in order for those rights to be protected for everyone, we must protect those rights for, again, the most heinous people. So how did I do trying to explain that, Chloe?
Hey, you did good, Dad. You did good. That is that is their right, even when you don't like them, even when they're reprehensible. It's more about, are we holding the government to its own standard
That's right.
for the presumption of innocence? And if you're going to bring criminal charges against someone where their life is in jeopardy, where their liberty is at jeopardy, you better make sure you have the evidence to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. That's what we do. We hold the government accountable. And the same type of rights and protections apply to Donald Trump, as
That's
much
right.
as he irks me. Yeah.
Exactly. And this we're talking about a former president who already is facing 34 state felony charges, and who likely will face more in a couple of months down in Georgia. It's not Fulton County. What's that county?
Is it DeKalb County?
Maybe DeKalb County. Yeah, one of those counties down there around Atlanta. So I mean,
Yeah.
he could have 70, 80 different felony counts, both state and federal, that he could be facing. And that doesn't include, so my point is, wow. These are uncharted waters. This is amazing when you really think about it. Really, really, really amazing that a former president, and just to keep it real, and there are many millions of people around the country who still support him strongly and are just saying, look, we don't care about this. This is all political. He's a political victim here. He's
Yep.
being prosecuted. He's being persecuted politically. He didn't commit these crimes, and of course, people bring up, and I think there's some credibility to bringing up the fact that Joe Biden had some classified documents in his possession. I think Mike Pence did. Now Trump tried to say Obama did, but the NARA said no, he did not. No, he did not. They immediately shot that down. So yeah, I mean, this is again uncharted waters for our country, but we'll get through it.
We will. And we will keep you all updated as this case continues to go through the court system and what happens. So stay tuned. We will break down each and every new development that comes out in regards to Trump's federal indictments.
All right, so now before I get into the voting rights case, let us read a couple of comments from the listeners. Hello, Sister Ave. Hello, Sister
Hey.
Ave. Sister Ave, you said something last week that I didn't know, and it helps me understand a lot. And that is, you mentioned how your father was a very active civil rights activist. That helped me understand some things, because you certainly have a passion for social justice and civil rights. You have stood with us, with me in particular, when I've taken some bold stands over the past couple of years. So I appreciate that, and it's just good to know that you come from a tradition of like Chloe does, of people fighting for social and racial justice. And Sister Abe says that Donald Trump is a very dangerous man. Ditto. Twice impeached. Let's not forget.
Yep.
Patrick's, wait a minute. Let me see if I'm pronouncing this right. Patrick's time. Still no evidence Trump committed a crime. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that there's no evidence. There's a lot of evidence, but that evidence has not been put before grand jury. I mean, pardon me, a regular or petite jury, and they've found him guilty or he hasn't pled guilty. So there is evidence, but the weight of that evidence we're still yet waiting to see here. Trump was indicted same day. This is Patrick's time as well. Trump was indicted same day, evidence of a $5 million foreign bribe taken by Biden. Okay, so anyway, I mean, I don't know what really to say about that. If Biden took a $5 million bribe, I'm sure that will be prosecuted as well. I'm sure a whole lot more would have been said about that by now. And by the way, your guy is not innocent just because you make allegations against another guy. Right? It's like saying he did it too. That doesn't mean we can't do that when we're in court. You know, judge, we can't say, well, judge, this person over here did X, Y, Z, and the judge is going to shut us down, probably throw us out of court. What are you talking about? We're in here on your guy. We're talking about your guy. All right, so defend the allegations against your guy. Don't point to this guy, that guy. That has nothing to do with anything. Chloe, is that right?
That's so right. And Patrick, if you want to provide proof of where you read that, I'm willing to look into it. But what we're talking about now is Trump being under federal indictment and
That,
it being unprecedented. It never happened before in the history of this country. That is what is of pertinence right now. But if you want to provide proof, go ahead. I'd be happy to read it.
that's a very good point, Chloe. I'm glad you said that. So yeah, Patrick, if you got proof of that, provide that to us, and we'll do a show on that next week. But we're
Yeah.
not going to do it. We're not going to do it on some foolishness. Okay, you gotta come strong. All right, so come with whatever evidence you got, you say you have, or whatever's been out there. And if it's not just some sort of kind of right wing chatter, then we'll look at it and we'll do a show on it. I'm not a
Yeah.
Democrat. You know, I'm not a Democrat. I'll go wherever the truth is. I mean, that's why we're called defiant lawyers. All right, so let's move on, Chloe, because we're trying to do this as close within an hour as possible. So I'm going to truncate a lot of my comments that I had planned to make about the Alabama voting case. So let me take a deep breath as I prepare to talk about this case a little bit, as we prepare to discuss it, Chloe. I know I'm leading the conversation on this, but chime in, interrupt me, jump in, step in at any time, with whatever you have to say. But this is a case here that really, really, really means a lot to me and to the African American community. And I must say, just last week, we predicted a different outcome. We predicted that the Voting Rights Act, which is what this case involved, would have been today. Today or sometime this month in June, we would be coming back to our subscribers and basically saying the Voting Rights Act is completely dead at this point. So we are surprised, and I think the country is shocked, knowing that 6 conservatives on the court have been fighting the Voting Rights Act pretty much all their careers. And so where this came from This came completely out of left field. Now, Chloe, before I get into the details, a little bit of the details, what are your comments about just being shocked of the ruling in this case?
I think that the justices and Chief Justice Robert has heard the chatter about how political this court has become, and how little faith the American people have had in this court, based on the rulings that have happened, based on the allegations against Clarence Thomas and nothing being done with that. And so, I'm sure he's heard about the chatter, and he wants to protect the Supreme Court and, protect the prestige that it's had for all of these hundreds of years. So I'm sure that some of that played into their decision as well, because it is not tracking with the recent decisions that have come out, you know,
Exactly.
of these huge prominent cases that have changed precedent for the past couple of years. So it was shot in that regard, and they got some good news coverage about it, and so I'm sure that that pleased them as well.
Yes, very good. So you're essentially saying more than it being a principled decision on behalf of the Chief Justice and Brett Kavanaugh, the other conservative who sided with the liberals in this case, that it was more pragmatic, even more politics than it was what they really truly believe about the Voting Rights Act. And uh, I completely agree with that. All right.
Yeah.
Now, the Voting Rights Act is at the heart of this case. Um, this case, by the way, is Milligan v. Merrill, okay, out of Alabama. And just a little background on this case. Basically, Alabama is a state that has about 27% African American population. The Alabama legislature drew up a voting map of 7 districts, and of those 7 districts, let me put some of this information on the screen. So yes, the U.S. Census Bureau says that Black Americans are roughly just a little bit under 27% of Alabama's population. Yet, Black Alabamians have only one minority voting district. And here's a picture of it here. That one voting district goes to African Americans, and the rest of the state are, as you see here, carved up into 6 white majority voting districts. Now, the plaintiffs, once this voting map was released, Black African American plaintiffs sued the Secretary of State and essentially said this is racial gerrymandering. You all have drawn a map here that basically puts all Black folk in one area, and therefore you've diluted our voting strength for the state of Alabama. So 3 different plaintiffs filed suit against Alabama, basically. And a 3-judge panel heard all the evidence in this case, heard all the evidence, all the experts, received a bunch of documents. They did a thorough job just getting the facts in this case. And they released an opinion that essentially said this is not even a close one. Alabama violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Okay? Now, let's back up. Because the Voting Rights Act is probably the most important federal legislation that has ever been passed on behalf of African Americans. It dates back to 1965, okay, when Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement were at their peak, and pushed the country, especially Lyndon Johnson, to pass 3 different civil rights laws: the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 65, and the Fair Housing Act. And the Voting Rights Act Section 4 and 5 of it, Section 5 to be particular, required certain states that were notoriously guilty of voter suppression to have to get pre-clearance before they passed any voter laws. They had to first check in, pursuant to the Voting Rights Act. They had to check in with the Justice Department. The Justice Department had to clear or approve or whatever law they wanted to pass. That went on for many years, and it resulted in a lot of African Americans, a lot more African Americans getting elected from southern states particularly. In fact, Tim Scott of South Carolina was the first black senator elected since Reconstruction, over 100 years. All of that is due to the Voting Rights Act, okay? And of course, Obama getting elected and reelected, and Kamala Harris elected vice president, and Obama president twice. So the powers to be, the white power structure, said we got to do something with the Voting Rights Act because it's causing us to lose our country. So we got to do something with it. So in a case called Shelby County versus Holder, Chief Justice John Roberts, the same man who wrote this opinion that we're talking about, he wrote an opinion which essentially gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Section 5 required preclearance based on a formula in Section 4. If a state met the requirements of Section 4, again, a bunch of formulas, then Section 5 kicked in and they had to get preclearance. So what Scotus did in a 5-4 decision, Scotus said that Section 4, the formulas in Section 4 were outdated. Okay, they were outdated. So essentially that caused Section 5 to be null and void without Section 4. That was a major, major, major setback for the Voting Rights Act. And to prove it, Southern states immediately, the next day after the case was handed down, North Carolina, my home state, Alabama, and other states immediately passed voter suppression laws. And when I talk about voter suppression laws, that's what the whole civil rights movement was about in many regards. I mean, when we see the water hoses and the dogs back in the 60s, all that, a lot of that had to do with voting. Those people, our people, that march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, those people marched. John Lewis led that march across Edmund Pettus to go and register to vote. And that's why they were attacked the way they were attacked, because the powers to be, the white power structure, refused to allow them to vote because they knew that would bring about some changes, right? So 60 years later, they said, okay, enough's enough, and we got to weaken the Voting Rights Act. They did so by gutting Section 5. That left Section 2. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act it doesn't require preclearance. Basically, what it says is if you can show, I have the language here, if you can show that there's been some racial discrimination in voting laws, then you can get it can be overturned. Okay, so the plaintiffs in this Alabama case sued under Section 2 because Section 5 is null and void now because the court got rid of Section 4 that had the outdated maps according to John Roberts. And so back to the fact that this 3-judge panel heard all the evidence and said, yes, this violates Section 2. Alabama appealed, and the case ended up in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. They granted writ of certiorari, heard oral arguments, and it was, Chloe, you remember when Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Jackson, she said in that case, and she brought the heat. I mean, I enjoyed listening to oral arguments in that case. She brought the heat. She said things that would have never been said because, of course, Clarence Thomas, the other African American on the court, would have never said the things that she said. He replaced Justice Thurgood Marshall, who is golden in our eyes. You went to a law school named in his honor. And I have a picture of him in my office. I mean, he led the way, desegregating public schools and then becoming the first Black U.S. Supreme Court justice. So Ketanji Brown Jackson did a wonderful job in her oral questioning and back and forth with Alabama's attorney. So we all thought that the Voting Rights Act was gone. It was basically gone. Well, in this opinion, John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh voted with the three liberals, and the Voting Rights Act survived. Okay? Now, I'm reluctant to go into a whole lot of legal details as to why it survived, because it just may be beyond our subscribers. Yeah, I mean, it was just based on the language of the Voting Rights Act here in Section 52 USC 10301 and Section B of that same subsection B of that same section of the Voting Rights Act, and it was also based on a case from North Carolina, actually, Thornburg versus Gingles. The court looked at Thornburg versus Gingles and the Voting Rights Act and essentially said, we agree with that 3-judge panel. This one goes in favor of Black folks. And as you said, Chloe, I think in their minds, they were thinking, if we're getting ready to strike down affirmative action, we gutted Section 5. The Bronovich case weakened Section 2 just a couple of years ago. This may be much for the country to handle right now. So I think we need to slow up with our attack on the Voting Rights Act, a stapled civil rights piece of legislation. I think we need to slow up because, as you said, Chloe, the country sees us, a majority of the country sees us as more of a political court, an activist court, than a court guided by principles, right? So they let it stand for now, but it's not going to stand permanently. More cases are coming. In fact, I read the dissent that Thomas wrote, and Thomas is leading the way, believe it or not. Clarence Thomas is leading the way. He wrote the dissent that Alito joined, that Gorsuch joined, and even Kavanaugh wrote a concurrent opinion that sort of laid out too how whites can come next time and present a better case where the facts are not so skewed toward African Americans. I think, in addition to the pragmatic and political reasons they let Section 2 survive, Chloe, I think in this case, the facts were just so overwhelming. Again, bottom line is 27% of Alabama's population is African Americans. That's almost a third. And for them to only have one voting district out of 7, it stinks. I mean, something is wrong. I mean, how is this happening? Why is 27% population only got 1 out of 7? That's not 27%. 1 out of 7 is what? 14, 15% maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the law says the Voting Rights Act says that there's no right to a proportionate percentage of representatives. Just because you're 27%, the Voting Rights Act does not say that you're entitled to 27% representation, but it does say that that's a factor. I mean, you got to take a close look at that. So that's the long and short of what happened with the Voting Rights Act. And let me just say my final thoughts on this case is the Voting Rights Act is still severely damaged, although it survived this battle because of Section 5 and because of the weakening of Section 2. So the opposition will file other cases until they get the victory they want, which is to completely destroy the Voting Rights Act, especially if we do nothing. And last of all, Congress needs to enact the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, because it would, among other things, repair the formula, restore Section 5, and do some other things. All right, so those are my final thoughts on this case.
I mean, yeah, I mean, voting is such an essential part of a democracy. And, it's one of the major reasons why America was founded, Dad. We know that, British citizens came over to this country and colonized it and, wiped out the Native Americans. But, in addition to that, a major fight for the American Revolution was the taxation without representation. So, the colonies were being taxed, but did not have any representation in the British Parliament and the British monarchy, etc. And so, the United States Constitution said that, you know, representatives and senators would be elected by popular vote. The president would be elected by the Electoral College, but the Constitution did not say specifically who could vote. So back in the 1800s, the 1700s, it was white men, it was land owning men. Black people were not included, neither were white women. So we've had this fight for hundreds of years for us to be able to get the representation for our interests, even though Black Alabamians, Black people in this country pay taxes. We are law abiding citizens. We are a part of this democracy, but they are wanting us not to have the representation for our interests, which is the exact same thing that the British colonists did when they, came to this country in the first place. So whenever I hear, conservatives say that, the sons of patriots and they're patriots and all of that, no, you're not. You're not, because you are supporting a party or a line of thinking that wants to disenfranchise fellow Americans, Black Americans. So, I'm glad that Chief Justice Roberts, authored this opinion, and Brett Kavanaugh signed on with the liberal judges. I'm still not that optimistic that it won't be just gutted that in the future,
It,
just like you said.
it
I
will
feel
be.
like that's coming. It
Yeah.
will be. Yeah, it will be. And so many Black people gave their life in the fight for freedom for us to be able to vote and to have representation. So it would truly be a slap in the face to those people, and not just Black people, white people as well, and others, to gut the Voting Rights Act and the protections that came with it, and legislating what the 15th Amendment says, what the 14th Amendment says, etc. So even though, I'm pleasantly surprised, I'm not optimistic that in the future, just like we said, it won't be gutted even further and just continue to be a slap in the face for the people who died for our protection and our right to vote.
So, well said. And a couple of things. Voting has consequences. Elections have consequences. There are even a lot of African Americans who are out here saying, why vote? The Democrats take our votes for granted, which I agree in some cases, and the Republicans just completely disregard us as voters. Um, uh, Although many of them know that if they can shave off or at least a percentage of Black voters, they tend to have a better chance of winning, especially national elections. Other than that, they completely disregard our vote. Voting, elections have consequences. I want to ask our subscribers to do me one favor. List one thing that you know in the comments, one consequence of this last election. Okay? Let me list a couple from a previous election. the election that, and I'm going to go to the comments because Patrick Times made a comment that I really want us to go back to. And let me say it what it is, and we'll come back to it. He said he's attacking Biden, okay? Biden authored the racist 1994 crime bill. Biden supported segregation. So we're going to come back to those in just a moment, okay? Now, elections have consequences. There are so many examples. I want to give you 3 big ones. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Act, and a part of the Civil Rights Act was the Equal Employment Opportunity Act. All that happened as a result of the election of Lyndon Baines Johnson. But there are many, 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 many other examples of consequences that elections have had. Now, while we wait on our folks to suggest 1 or 2 other consequences, Chloe, let me just quickly say, let me respond to the Biden authored the racist 1994 crime bill. I agree. I agree with your condemnation of Joe Biden and him having taken part in the 1994 crime bill. I'm old enough to remember when that bill was passed. I'm old enough to remember what was going on around that bill. I remember it very well, very, very, very well. And it turned out to be a very bad bill. And Joe Biden, while a senator, yes, took parts in other things and said things that were bad, were even racist. I'm not, I mean, I don't know what your point is here, Patrick Times, but I tend to think that most white people are white supremacists, Democrats included. So it's not like you're opening my eyes because at the end of the day, I think, yes, Joe Biden is a white supremacist. By that, I mean a white person who believes that the country should be governed by whites, that whites, have certain superiority. I think just being honest, I think if you line 10 whites up, 8, 9 of them are white supremacists in their hearts, even the nice ones, the good ones. So you're not saying anything to me when you point out that Democrats are racist. Certainly there are. I mean, this is a racist country. I mean, what are you talking about? So that doesn't really mean a whole lot there to say that. In this day and time, however, the Republican Party has unabashedly, unapologetically, and by the way, I was a Republican for a long time. Patrick Times, I was a Republican for a long time. I was
Voted
also
Republican too, right? That
I voted Republican. That's right. And I was a Democrat for a long time. I was a Republican for a long time. I have been an independent now for a long time. I'm 60 years old. You could politically, you could divide my life up into three periods. First 20 years, I was a Democrat. The next 20 years, I was a Republican. The last 20 years, I have been independent. And that is the best fit. That's the best fit for me because I have issues with both parties. Big, strong issues with the Democrat Party. I will never be a Democrat again. I have big issues with the Republican Party. Will never be a Republican again. I'm an independent voter. So you're not saying much of anything to say to me that Joe Biden is racist or Robert Burr was a part of the KKK and the Democrats, the Dixiecrats were the ones who enslaved black. You're not saying anything to me. I mean, Come on. We're
And most
smarter
black
than
people
that.
too, that most black we know that. We know the history of the Democrats. You know, we know that black people have been a loyal base for the Democrats, but I think it's we're wide-eyed in a lot of our support of the Democrat Party. We know that um it stems back to the mid 20th century with Lyndon B. Johnson signing all of those, the Voting Rights, Civil Rights, Fair Housing Act, and the Democrats tending to look more towards the federal government to help with justice issues. And African Americans, we've had to turn to the federal government to help us get equality. You know, if it were left to the states, like a lot of Republicans want to do, or conservatives, we would likely still have slavery. You know, we would not have the right to vote and all of these other issues. So we've looked towards the federal government to help us with equality. And the current Democratic Party, their platform tends to look more towards the federal government to do that. So I think personally that's why a lot of African Americans still remain loyal to the Democrats for that reason. But we do so not um, ignorantly. We know just what my dad was saying, that a lot of Democrats are white supremacists at heart. But at the end of the day, it has been the federal government that has helped us to achieve the equality that we're striving for.
So Patrick makes another or asks another question that really is. Patrick, you gotta ask tougher questions. These are softball questions that you're asking us. I think you, like Chloe just said, I think you underestimate us. Okay, and here's this question he asked: what percentage of violent crime is committed by black men? Okay,
It's the
Are-
same. It's the same line of thinking and questioning. It's so just come on, come better.
really?
But
So I think if you looked, I think if you did some research with the Justice Department, I think there may be some evidence that African American men commit a disproportionate percentage of the violent crimes in the country. In all truthfulness, I think that that's true. But if your real question is who's the most violent person in America, if that's your real question, let me answer that for you. Black men didn't kill 6 million Jews. Black men did not colonize continents, raped and pillaged. Black men didn't lynch people based on the color of their skin. Black men did not kill tens of millions of Africans. Black men didn't do that. So if you want to talk about who the most violent person is in America and probably on the globe, it is unquestionably white men. For the record. For the record. And most of that violent crime that you referenced regarding black men, most of it is geared toward other black men, unfortunately. When I say unfortunately, I'm pointing out that black homicide is the leading cause of death in the black community. I didn't say that because black men need to go out and start killing white people or anybody else. We need to stop all of it. But when you look at the impact of 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, systemic racism today, when you look at the impact of all that, the poverty, all that black men have to deal with, all the stuff we have to put up with, yeah, unfortunately, it does result in frustration, oftentimes turning into violence. Sometimes just out here trying to make money and so forth. But compare the violence committed by white men. Compare. I'm trying to think of this one king who
in
killed
Belgium,
10, and yes, killed 10 over 10 million Africans in the Congo.
King Leopold. He had a
Leopold,
private
that's his name.
slave. He made Congo a private slave colony, and he killed babies, children. He mutilated them so much so that even other Europeans who did the same thing were even like, "Hold up, bro! Now you going too far. Now we colonized Africa, we chopped it up, we cut it up, we killed them, but you just doing too much. You know when you doing too much, where Britain is saying you're doing too much, you're doing the most and um being violent. So yeah, I mean, Patrick, predictable.
Come better
What
than
else you
that.
got? What other questions?
Yeah, come better than that, my man. Who is it that rose up? Who rose up in Tulsa and killed over 300 black men and burned down that city burned down that section of Tulsa just because they were doing well, based on some concocted story of a black man assaulting a white woman? Who was it that killed Emmett Till, a completely innocent young, 15-year-old black? It was two white men. Who is it? Man, I could go on and on and on and on. Don't really, seriously. We know who is the most violent person is in this country, just based on the history.
And Dad, you know what gets me? There's this narrative that's going around of the forgotten young white men. You know, the who society has forgotten, and they are becoming the incels, and they have no voice and all of this. Yet when we bring up the forgotten black men,
That's
when
funny.
we bring up the racism that black men have had to face, and how society has forgotten black men, they don't care about that. But now I'm telling you, there's this narrative that is going around. Mainstream media, YouTube channels are all talking about the forgotten white men, and how frustrated they are and how they feel they don't have a voice, and why there's so many school shooters and mass shooters that are white.
Chloe, how many presidents have we had?
What,
45?
47?
40, okay,
46.
46. How many have been white men?
45.
45. How many folks in Congress? 550 something? How many white men? Majority. How many folks have been on the U.S. Supreme Court? Quite a few. How many have been white men? Almost 90% of them. CEOs of companies. Are you true? What? How? What? There are so many privileges and advantages that white dudes have in this country. That's ridiculous. If a white guy in this country is not succeeding in life, I don't know what's wrong with him, because everything's geared toward him. I mean, everything is geared toward him. Okay? So whatever disillusioned white guys are out there, I don't know what to tell you, because I could see if you were maybe in, say, sub-Saharan Africa and you felt like we feel here, but here in this country, in other parts of the Western Hemisphere, if you feel, what was the word, Chloe?
Forgotten, disenfranchised.
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with you. Anyway, Patrick, that's our response to you, dude. We're probably not that crowd for you to bring that stuff to. But we enjoyed your comments still, and
They're fun. Yeah,
and come back.
please. And if you have the evidence or the news clipping about the Biden bribe, please post it. I'll look into it.
And if you have evidence that that black men are more violent than white men, bring that too. I know you can't find it, but bring it. Well, Chloe, is there anything else?
That's it. That is it. This has been fun. I like having this dialogue with you, Dad, and with the viewers, even if we strongly, vehemently disagree with them. Um, it makes for a lively show. So share the video. If you have any questions or comments, let us know. We'll address it. We'll bring facts and evidence, and we'll be defiant doing it. Because who are we, Dad?
We are the divine lawyers.
That's who we are.
So your mother, she says this a lot anyway. Elections have consequences, and so I knew she would find some good stuff. So one of the things that she put up here is the Biden administration cut poverty in half for Black children during the pandemic, passed a law advancing more equity in Blacks having their homes appraised. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Ma.
And she also points out to Patrick's question about who commits the most violent crime. It is white men, she points out, who are, the FBI said, are leading this domestic terrorism, which is the greatest threat to this nation.
Mm.
So, yeah, come on with that. Sister Ave says if a white man is not successful in this country, it's because they just haven't applied themselves at all. Thank you for saying that, Sister Ave, because that's exactly what they say to us. We must take personal responsibility and not, cry victimhood. And it sounds like, from what you said, Chloe, about these white guys saying that they're the forgotten ones, it sounds like a lot of victimhood to me. We get accused of that, but it sounds like from Trump on down, a lot of white men are playing the blame and the victim card here, from what I'm hearing. Okay, but in any event, we're not going to hold you all day. We appreciate you tuning in. It was invigorating. We love you. We love you. We love you. We appreciate you, Chloe. Any parting words before we end this?
No, we will be back same time next week talking about all of the pressing issues. Again, like this video, share this video, and we can't wait to see you all next week.
Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.
Peace.